Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dragon Talk. We have a crazy, fun, announcement-filled day today for all of the discussions of Dungeons & Dragons and new places and new worlds and new planes that we're traveling to. I am Greg Tito, and I am always joined by, what's your name again?
My name is Shelley.
And your last name? Do you have one?
Noble?
That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
How do you
new
spell
here.
that?
I don't know.
It's got M's and N's in it.
Yeah.
Lots of things.
Lots of Z's.
No D's, though.
Like a D&D city.
Or P's. We can't use P. Dang it, I did it already like 3 times because of the podcast.
Podcast.
The Oddcast.
We don't have any good... The Oddcast. That's pretty much what this
Well,
is.
actually, that's a good word for
God.
it.
The puns are coming. There were too many puns in our D&D game
Jeremy.
yesterday.
Uns.
Yeah.
Oh, it was pretty punchy yesterday, too, yes.
Punchy. Can't say unchy.
What? Come on.
Unchy.
I never realized how many P words there are.
There's
Greg
a lot
was
of
just
P's.
Could be a
starting to
drinking
explain this
game.
joke.
I know, right? Well, we don't have any... what are they called? The guards? Pop filters.
Pop filters.
Yes.
Filters.
So you're going to see a lot of blowing things up. I'm terrible. So I'm going to get to the actual
Don't
introductions.
make me pull the lever that opens the trap door underneath you guys.
All the
Yes.
lever.
Yes.
You've been dying to do that, Jeremy.
The whole
Yes.
time. So
My
these,
hand is quivering over the lever.
These fine gentlemen are not going to pull the lever on me, I swear. James Wyatt is here.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Thanks.
Jeremy Crawford is also here.
Hello, everyone.
And of course, calling in all the way from Ortland is Keith Baker. Hi, Keith.
It's lovely in Ortland this time of year.
So we have formed this,
Cabal.
pentaverate of people to discuss
Pentaverate.
Eberron and Ravnica, 2 new worlds that Dungeons & Dragons is traveling to in the somewhat near future, which is pretty crazy. So if you haven't heard yet, we have announced 2 new products today. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica is a Dungeons & Dragons book set in the plane of Ravnica from a little game called Magic the Gathering. And we'll get more about what the lore is behind that. But James was leading up that fun thing with some members of the D&D team, including Ari Levitch. Jeremy Crawford, you had your tendrils all over it, of course, as well.
My tendrils are everywhere.
So we'll talk about that, but then also the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, which Keith Baker is the design force behind creating that document that is up on the Dungeon Masters Guild right now for you to download, which is very cool. So very exciting, culmination of a lot of work for you, Keith, right?
Absolutely. And Jeremy did have his tendrils in there, too. He's
are
everywhere. It's
They
crazy.
really are everywhere.
Far-reaching tendrils.
So many
Jeremy,
tendrils.
stop. Keep it to yourself, man.
So, as I said, Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron is available right now, and Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, though, is coming out later this fall. It'll be available everywhere November 20th and in game stores on November 11th, and we're really excited about that as well. So, we are going to, I think that's pretty much all the announcements and news talk we want to do before we throw it to a segment, except one thing about what this means for Dungeons & Dragons as a whole.
So this is sort of a tale, this travel to other worlds that we have been telling very slowly, bit by bit. It's like the slow drip storytelling that we've been doing since the release of 5th edition, where we tell you in the core books, the D&D multiverse has all of these different worlds. We've spent a fair amount of time in the Forgotten Realms thus far. We took a trip, a very dark gothic trip, to the realm of Ravenloft in the form of Curse of Strahd. People who have Tales from the Yawning Portal have gotten to make some visits to the world of Greyhawk. And so this journeying out of exploring other vast reaches within the D&D multiverse is this journey that we're now making a big jump in with the announcement of these 2 products. So with Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, we're going really, really far in the multiverse, actually phasing over into another multiverse, the Magic multiverse, and showing just how much those 2 worlds of gaming actually have in common. It's been really exciting working on the book to see how naturally we've been able to express many things that are in Magic using the language of Dungeons & Dragons. Right. And we can talk more about what's specifically in that book in a bit. But I think D&D fans who've never played Magic before are going to enjoy that book, and I think Magic fans are going to come and say, hey, I recognize all of this, but now in D&D clothing. Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron is a different type of journey for us because here we're returning to a world that some of us have spent a lot of time in the past. As many people know, Eberron is a world that glimmered into existence back in 3rd edition. It was alive and well through 4th. And we have certainly had many references to it in 5th edition, but this is our first time to really sort of get off the interplanar ship and actually walk around a little bit to see this wonderful world of lightning rails and Warforged and magic that is often far more common than what you'd expect in a typical D&D world.
Right.
That product is different from the Guildmaster's Guide, which, again, out in November, a book as people have come to be accustomed to with D&D, although it is unusual for 5th because we've been on a 3-book cycle, and now suddenly we have a 4th book.
Yes, and it
that's
contains
confusing.
everything that
That's
you need to
confusing.
play D&D in those multiverse in
In
Ravnica as
Ravnica.
well.
So what we're doing instead with the Wayfinder's Guide, because we're still not ready to let loose a book into the world, we still wanted people to be able to get back to Eberron. And we thought something that has worked so well for us for the life of 5th edition, going all the way back to the D&D Next playtest, which included the book Ghosts of Dragonspear Castle, is how valuable it is to be in conversation with longtime fans of the game, and now in this case, longtime fans of Eberron, and really get people's feedback on, is this how you see Eberron? You're like, if you could give us your dream list for the ultimate version of Eberron, what's on that list? And the things that Keith has created, are they fulfilling the dreams on that list, or would you like us to tweak it in some way? So really, the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron is a way for us to start this journey together with everyone in the world of Eberron. It is filled not only with Eberron-specific game mechanics for people to try out, but honestly, the bulk of it, and Keith will be able to talk more about this later, the bulk of it is actually world lore that is ready to go now, and also tons of hooks for you to create your own adventures in Eberron. So the pieces of this book that are sort of they are ready for prime time. It's actually most of the Wayfinder's Guide. There are the mechanical bits that we're going to test for a bit. We've even released a few of the mechanical bits today in Unearthed Arcana, and people are going to be excited to know that as we tinker with those things, if they have bought the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, we will then make any changes we make as a part of our development process to the Wayfinder's Guide. So if you buy it, and then we later change how the Warforged work, we're going to update that PDF, and you will get those changes to the Warforged as a part of your purchase of the Wayfinder's
that's cool.
Guide. Yeah, so it's
constantly evolving.
It's sort of, and that's why we're releasing it initially as a PDF rather than a print product to start, with this idea that it would build toward such a product at a later date. With people really, as they did with the D&D Next playtest, having a chance to, in a way, have a say in the final shape that Eberron takes.
But it's also very robust. It is not a small document, right?
No.
Keith, you spent a lot of
That is
time
true.
working on this, right?
Yes.
It's 126 pages. Is that what it ended up being?
170 about.
70 pages?
Yeah.
Every time I turn around, it's like 25 pages have been added.
Yeah, we just noticed today that, there was another 20 pages. So, yeah.
Just noticed.
Keeps and crawls.
I feel like you might have been thinking about this for a while.
Yes.
Just a little bit. 16 years, whatever.
Yeah.
That's 170 pages of content that is got a lot of heart and soul and editing time and artwork and layout and things that are I think fans have been clamoring for fans of Eberron.
And also one special thing I want to point out about the Wayfinder's Guide is when Keith and I initially talked about him creating this for D&D fans, we really wanted, and this goes back to what I was saying about sort of your dreams for Eberron. Right. We really wanted it to be Keith's dream for Eberron. So this is really Keith's vision, with occasionally me piping in with a little bit of feedback. James has given some feedback. Others on the team have given feedback. But at the end of the day, people are getting the vision of Keith, who was the original creator of this setting, going back to the big setting search in 3rd edition. So it's also an exciting chance for people to see Keith's vision. Nice. And it's a vision that we will get to, again, participate in together as we tinker with the game mechanics bits. And I'm sure Keith will probably be coming up with hundreds of additional pages in your mind that you want to add.
Yeah. Have you working on the next 170 pages already?
Well, I'm already thinking about things. I mean, I have these tables at the end that are things you could encounter in Sharn that are currently 40 options per quarter. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I could just keep adding to those,
yes.
Add another D20
infinite.
Every couple weeks,
That's really cool stuff. Are you excited, Keith, to have it out in the wild finally?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been something where I've been running campaigns in Eberron now for, over the course of the last year. But of course, haven't been able to talk about it or to share it with anyone or anything like that. And it's wonderful to finally be able to actually share it with all the people who are out there. And also, now that it's part of the DMs Guild, just to see what other people come up with and think of. And so I'm just very excited about it.
Yeah, that's a facet of it that we hadn't really highlighted here. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. People will now be able to design stuff within the world of Eberron and put that up, and we'll see how the public reacts to those as well. It's always good to see D&D creators out there doing more with the play set that we give them, right? Mm-hmm. Cool stuff. All right, so even though there is a lot going on today that we've already talked about, there is always more to mention. So Dice Camera Action had their episode 100, parts 1 through 5. Mr. Chris Perkins and Jerry Holkins as Dungeon Master for that last one together was super great. Those videos are available now on Penny Arcade's YouTube page. They will be later on the D&D YouTube page as well. So extra special 5-part Waffles Incorporated crossover. Go check those out when you can. We'll message from the D&D Twitter when they'll be available on the D&D YouTube page. We had Sirenscape in here last week, recording sounds for the Waterdeep Dragon Heist adventure, which will be out in September. The sound pack will also be available on September 9th. You can download it and play it within Sirenscape. And for those of you who don't know, Sirenscape is a soundboard that is optimized for use for Dungeon Masters at the table. And we're really excited about custom sounds, some of them recorded by people in this very room for things that you can hear by pressing a button. You'll be able to hear them, and it's pretty cool.
That was really fun.
It was a lot of fun. Did you do it? What did you do?
I totally did. Got to use my theater degree. I laughed. I cried. I groveled. I spoke. I did spells, and then I got to be in a tavern. I was a drunk person in a tavern.
These are all things way outside of your wheelhouse.
Method acting. And a posh person in a tavern.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really fun.
That's awesome. So yeah, look for that on September 9th. We also have Founders and Legends Day coming up this weekend. We'll be streaming from Los Angeles, Luke Gygax, as well as Joe Manganello, Stefan Picorni, Satine Phoenix, Rudy Ruenberg, Mike Merles, Jason Charles Miller, TJ Storm, Kelly Lynn D'Angelo from Girl Scouts Lore. They were just at San Diego Comic-Con doing awesome stuff there. Mike No and Amy Vorpal and more. And it's kicking off our initiative to raise money for Extra Life this year. So a bunch of Extra Life pages are going live, including news on how you can join the D&D team and stream your tabletop play to raise money for kids in the Children's Hospital Network. So look for more information to drop this week on that, but we're really excited about it. And last thing I want to mention, I did say we had a great time at San Diego Comic-Con this past weekend with Nathan Stewart, Satine Phoenix, and Pelham Green doing awesome work down in San Diego. Adventures Outlined was there, as well as Joe Manganiello's Death Saves apparel. Good stuff. Can't wait for that coloring book to come out
cool.
soon. That's coming out next month. That's coming out in August, which is going to be great. August 21st, you'll be able to see it. Todd James is the artist, and Adam Lee from the D&D team wrote the text that you'll find on those pages. So I'm excited about that. Very cool. All right, I think that's all the announcement stuff that I'm going to get to before we go to a wonderful segment where I think it's going to be me and Jeremy talking. What do you think?
I guess.
Oh.
Fine. All right. Well, go ahead and listen to this really fun segment right now. This is how the sausage is made, people. And that was that great segment. That was so fun to listen to, wasn't it, you guys?
Yeah.
Which we will actually we'll record after this.
After this, right?
Yes.
Ah, great.
No pressure.
We are time travelers.
Let's
That's
make it
what's
fun.
so great about podcast creating stuff. So now we get to have
Good. I got lots of questions.
so many questions, right? You start.
All
What do you want to hear about first, Shelley?
Let's go to Keith for this one. Hi,
right.
Keith.
Caller, are you there?
Hi, long-time listener. So Eberron was my very first setting that I ever played D&D in. My little sorceress was from Sharn.
Is that true?
Oh,
Totally true. So how do you? I don't even know. It's 170 pages. Is there? Are we seeing familiar things in here from the Eberron that we have explored in? Is it new stuff? Was it stuff like you've been thinking about since 3rd edition? Like, God, I wish I changed that, or wish I could open. Or is it like, hey, there's this whole new world that you didn't even know existed on this plane? What is in this book?
One of the things about it was not wanting to just retread what we've already done in the 3.5 and 4th edition campaign setting books, because those are all out there. So we didn't want to just redo, here's the same descriptions and here's the same history and such that you've already got. So really what the Wayfinder's Guide is all about is giving you, either as someone who knows the world or knows nothing about it, everything you need to just dive in and make a character or a story in this world. So it's much less sort of about the details of history or geography and much more about the feel of the world and ways that as a game master you can work that into your story, or as a player you can work it into your character. So, for example, we talk about the countries of Corvair, but the focus is really on what does this mean for you? What kind of character is going to come from here? And what are some hooks you can play with to reflect that? Or for the religions, well, what does it actually mean? If you choose this as your religion, what is your character trying to do? Likewise with Sharn, there's a big 40 or 50 page section on Sharn. It's not just a retread of the Sharn source book. It's much more about sort of background ideas for characters. We have a couple sections I call starting points, which are basically 3 different locations you could use as a place to kick off a campaign, sort of with ideas of like the theme, how that location could tie to a theme of a campaign, bring the characters together and really give you something to work with. So the whole point is it's familiar. This is the Eberron old fans will recognize, but it's trying to really sort of open up the story and give you ways to think about it that you might not have thought about before, and really just give you a lot of stuff to just use right away and hit the ground running.
Has there been a time passage in Eberron, or is it you kind of set in the same period as the other books were?
In this book, it's still in the default time of 998, which is right after the last war. Because again, like I said, this is really more about the tone of Eberron than delving too deeply into the history. One of the things we very much talk about is the last war, the mourning, and how these things can affect a story. But as I said, it's really just about capturing the tone and how you can use it than doing anything like a big timeline advance.
So maybe there's people that haven't explored in Eberron. I don't know who they are. Maybe. But how would you define the tone of Eberron for those people?
So to me, Eberron sort of occupies this space between sort of swashbuckling adventure and sort of neo-noir intrigue, and it's up to each group to sort of find their path. Are you sort of over the top, swinging on the chandeliers? The adventure we just did was literally jumping from an airship onto a train, a lightning rail to steal an artifact. Or do you want to do more sort of gritty intrigue, Gangs of New York, Big Sleep sort of stories? So one of course, the big things that came up, Eberron is a world where magic is more widespread than in many of the traditional settings. So you do have sort of magic as part of everyday life, including the Warforged, these sort of sentient artificial humanoids created for the last war. But at the same time, it's very much it's not over the top. You don't have casual resurrection or teleportation. It's just that magic is a tool people have used to create the world, and how does that impact things? So it takes a lot of the sort of basic ideas of D&D and just sort of expands them out a little bit more, which frankly, I would say 5th edition itself has already sort of moved towards Eberron in a lot of ways. We were noting that we have wand slingers, which are sort of people using wands as casual tools of war, as it were, and that's really supported by the way that 5th edition has approached magic.
I've always loved that trope of having the two wands, throwing them everywhere. That's so fun. I always want to make a character like that.
I'm running a campaign at the moment. One of the 3 campaigns I'm running is set off in the nation of Kabara, which is over to the east of Eberron, and it's very much has a sort of fantasy western, gunslinger, small mining town sort of feel, and it's been working really well. We've been having a great time with it.
I love that. And now, James, you also worked on Eberron back in the 3.5 era, right? You were one of the writers on the original book.
Yep.
And you also have another connection with Keith, right? I'm not sure if everyone knows.
No. We were just telling the story before we started recording that about the second day that Keith was in the office developing Eberron during the setting search, I looked at him and was like, you are really familiar. Do you have a sister? Because it turns out
like
that...
you do.
Yeah. A friend of mine was dating Keith's sister, and Keith and I played D&D together years before I came to work at Wizards.
That's insane.
And I'd totally forgotten about it. Like, I went home the first night and was looking through records from that old campaign, and I was like, there he is, Keith Baker. He ran this adventure.
The royal family of Corvair, their name is the Wyrnarn family, and I believe your character was named Wirid,
yes,
I think, in
that's
that
exactly
original
right.
D&D campaign. We sort of
Celtic
slipped it in there
barbarian.
as a slight homage.
Oh.
That's a cool little Easter egg. I didn't know that at all. Yeah.
But
And it was also in Ithaca.
I was going to say, this happened in Ithaca, New York, not even... That's even
That's right.
weirder.
Right.
Ithaca pops up on this podcast a lot.
It really does.
The most
gorgeous.
beautiful city in New York.
I can't. I'm
Gorgeous.
resisting the urge to say that it's gorgeous.
Say it. Just say it.
All the bumper stickers
I'm
say
gonna.
it.
I'm gonna bring you home a bumper sticker. That's
Please.
what it
Oh,
says.
yeah, right. Because you're going back
I'm
there.
going back next week.
Nice. You can say hi to Keith's sister.
I will. Do you want any messages for your sister?
Oh, I'm actually going to Ithaca next week. So,
Maybe
I'm
Keith
just
and
saying,
I
maybe
will
we'll
play
bump into each other.
D&D.
That's
We
right.
can play some Eberron.
Let's do it.
That's so cool. Now, do you remember any, because you were the dungeon master in that session, is that right?
Yeah. Well, it was a big campaign where they had rotating DMs, and I basically jumped in and ran like a little 3-shot, I think it was. And it was a lot of fun. I remember, as I said, it was a semi-historical campaign. So it was
first
like
century
medieval
Roman
Europe.
Empire with a dose
Right.
of fantasy.
Okay, so I was going to ask if it had any, pre-Eberron, thoughts going on in it.
No, it was definitely pre-Eberron, and I remember that James was playing a sort of barbarian paladin.
That's right.
And I think
Odd
mine
combo.
was set.
Well, in second edition, barbarian wasn't a class; it was a kit.
It was a kit.
that I applied to my paladin.
Kit.
A kit.
Remember those?
Yep.
I had the ambidextrous kit, and everyone was like, "That's so OP."
What is the kit?
And
How does
I
the
don't
kit-
remember a ton of details about like specific things that happened, but I remember I really enjoyed James's character. It was a lot of fun. So.
That's cool.
I actually have an adventure record from that campaign, so I could go look it up.
An adventure
That's
record.
hilarious.
We had to, with multiple DMs, we had to keep track of what adventures had happened and when and where characters were in the world, because we had people traveling all over. It was pretty awesome.
That is cool. I
Yeah.
like that.
So so James, you are in some ways a bit of connective tissue between the two books announced today.
Yes.
Because our other book, the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, really grew out of your series of plane shift articles that you've been working on and releasing. And for anyone who's watching who doesn't know, James has been writing over the past few years these plane shift articles where he explores one of the many worlds of Magic the Gathering and provides guidance on using that world in Dungeons and Dragons. And we in D&D liked that series so much, we thought, how about we do a book? And looked at the schedule and realized Ravnica was coming. And Ravnica is an awesome world for adventure with the guilds and this world-spanning city and all of the intrigue that goes on inside that city. And so it just the timing was right. And so in many ways, anyone who's been watching the Plane Shift series, now seeing this announcement, would realize, oh, of course this was coming.
This makes perfect sense. Right.
We've been mixing that chocolate and that peanut butter for a few years now in your hands, and so naturally we came to you to lead the design of this book, which I will also add means that this has really turned into the year of the city because
Yeah.
the Wayfinder's
Lot of
Guide to
cities.
Eberron focuses on the city of Sharn. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica focuses on this planet-size city of Ravnica, and then our big fall D&D adventures focus on the city of Waterdeep. So this is a very urban year for D&D.
Which I'm all for. I'm like, more urban adventures, please. But I know there's probably a lot of Dungeons & Dragons fans who may be listening who don't know much about the lore behind Ravnica. So why don't you give us the quick overview or the long overview, depending on how you want to go. We got time.
So the most important thing about Ravnica is the 10 guilds that are the sort of social fabric of the whole place. They're its government, they're its voluntary organizations. They're kind of the primary source of conflict in the world is tension among them. And they are rooted in Magic gameplay. There are 5 colors of Magic in Magic. And it's fairly common to play a deck with 2 colors in it. And it turns out there are 10 combinations of 2 colors. Can
you explain the rules of Magic for us?
No. Nope.
Tap that land, and then
So each guild is associated with 2 colors of Magic in the Magic multiverse, which gives them all their unique flavor. Colors are associated not just with kinds of magic, but with personality traits. So the red-green Gruul clans are associated with the fiery emotion of red and the connection to nature and stability of green, to make this barbarian group of clans. I was going to say horde, but they're not that organized.
less organized than a horde. That's
Right.
never a good sign. But that's one of the major, guild organizations is the Gruul.
Right.
And they're
Right.
red, green, and then there's others, right?
Right. There are, in fact, 9 others.
Oh,
What are some of them?
Well, so there's a wheel I can go around. The blue-white Azorius Senate is the governing body of the plane. We call them planes in Magic.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Jeremy about that afterwards, how plane, planet, and world mean different things.
Yes.
Our whole Sage Advice segment is going to be about that.
Yeah. I mean, we already listened to that, so it's already happened.
Yes.
It's going to
that
be
really fun.
close.
Yes.
Time travel. Then the blue-black House Demir is a spy organization, basically. The blue-red guild is the Is It League, which is a group of wacky scientific inventors.
And
Black
adventurers, too.
Yes. Black Red is the cult of Rakdos, which is a demonic cult circus.
Whoa.
Black Green is the Golgari Swarm, which are sewer-dwelling dark elves, dark in the sense that they're away from the light, not... Well, anyway. Insects, creepy things, necromancy. I lost my place. Red-green is the Gruul. Red-white is the Boros Legion, which are very sort of paladin-y military force. Green-white is the Celestia Conclave, a hippie cult that can be roused into anger and mass its hordes to march over you.
If you live in Ithaca, that's probably where you're gonna...
Hello.
That makes sense. Right?
They sound a bit like the Baki from Greco-Roman myth.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
Although I would put red in there. Red, green. They're sort of more Gruulish. Anyway.
We should come up with a whole nother podcast of this, you two talking ancient myth and religion.
We do this for an hour a day at lunch.
Nice.
I mean, an hour a week at lunch. Yeah.
Let's talk theology.
Yes. He's not kidding.
I
I would
like
listen
this
to it.
too.
I know.
Let's
That's
talk
what's so...
theology with James Wyatt. I would totally tune in.
I'm pitching
and
that show
Jeremy
right now.
Crawford.
Yes.
And then finally, green-blue is the Simic Combine, which is the life sciences equivalent of the Izzet League, making hybrid creatures and body modification.
Very cool. And the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica is, has all you need to play Dungeons & Dragons in this world, including making adventurers that is in line with one of these clans, right?
Right.
Or what are they called again?
Guilds.
It's
Guildmaster.
yeah, it's in the
title.
title.
See, that's why I have experts in front of me, so I can just depend on you guys.
So we assume that you want to play a member of the guild. It's possible not to. If you want to just play a soldier, you can take the soldier background from the player's handbook. But if you want to play a member of a guild, each guild has a background, which is the primary way that you mark down your character's affiliation with a guild. But beyond that, then your guild gives you contacts and it points you in certain directions for race and class and spells, and you can track your renown with that guild. And we have each guild has its own system of ranks.
Do they all have names? All the ranks have names?
Only in the very hierarchical white-aligned guilds. I skipped the
makes
Orzhov, the white-black. How did I do that?
Orzhov.
How did you do that? You should be ashamed.
I should be.
Shame!
You notice I was doing this with my fingers as I was going around because they're white, blue, and then white, black, and blue, red. Anyway, in the color pie. The Orzhov
What do they do?
syndicate are organized crime, bank, and church.
Oh.
Well,
Speaking
how
of
can you
talking
just be
theology.
so overt about that? I mean, we're the organized crime guild. Like, you can't just announce that.
It's a fantasy world. Things are crazy.
Suspension of disbelief.
But yeah, as James was saying, there are backgrounds associated with each of the guilds. So if you decide you're going to be a member, then you can have that be a part of your character. We even present a few new subclasses in this book. In fact, a few that people have already seen. So what's been fun is we have actually been previewing this book for months in Unearthed Arcana, and people didn't realize it. So
it's all right under your nose,
the
people.
order domain for the cleric is actually a domain we're developing for the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica.
The Circle of the Spores, wasn't
Circle
it
of
also?
Spores for druids also
course.
is for this book.
For the Golgari.
The centaurs and minotaurs are also for this book because centaurs and minotaurs feature prominently in Ravnica. So when we did because in the Unearthed Arcana we had to hide all the time that we were working on a magic book, I think I just in the Unearthed Arcana said, and here are two species from Greco-Roman myth, and just left it at that, which is true.
How
That's
very
true.
demure of you is
Yes.
all I can say.
Yes, yes. So you can explore this amazing city, as James said, not as a sort of a free person, not a member of the guild. But again, we think people are going to want to dig in deep because of all the exciting story possibilities with guild membership. Now, I should say also the book gives you an overview of this huge, amazing city, and does it in a very adventure-building, DM-friendly way. Rather than us go block by block in a planet-sized city, which really no book would be large enough to contain, James and the rest of the team have done a fantastic job of giving you adventure-building building blocks that you can use for not only specific parts of the city, but parts of the city that are like that. So it's sort of like you have these variables, and you can fill in. I'm in a part of the city that's like this, and that's associated with this guild, and then you can use that to generate adventure material. I think people who don't even end up using the city of Ravnica itself might end up wanting to use many of these tables to create adventures elsewhere. And in fact, that was one of the design goals that we gave the writers, is make tables that are compelling enough that people might want to use them in other contexts. The other thing I should point out, because it's not the kind of thing when you look at the book you'd think immediately as a part of it, this book has bucket loads of monsters. It has a monster section that is, by my most recent count, approaching the length of the bestiary in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. So, so if people are simply wanting more monsters, this book has wall-to-wall monsters.
Especially ones that D&D fans may not have been encountering before, right?
Exactly.
These are new challenges.
Because the worlds of Magic the Gathering have monsters all their own, many of which have fantastic art. This was an opportunity.
All of which.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, in fact, this is the rare book where we're not sure we have room for all the art we could put in it. It is just a parade of monsters that D&D fans have never had before. And in terms of page count, we're trying to scrunch it down. So in terms of page numbers, it might end up being shorter than the bestiary and Mordenkainen's. But in terms of number of monsters, oh boy.
We're going with 6-point font
Wide
for
margin.
all of the monsters.
Tiny fonts.
We're gonna
You want your monsters or not?
We're going to break Trish and Emmy so that
Yes.
they do what we asked to get them all in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the other thing. This book is beautiful. It's being laid out as we speak, and we've been able to lean on Magic's vast treasure trove of art to illustrate this book. I think people are going to be dazzled by it.
You're using magic art or commissioning new art?
It's both.
Okay.
Yeah, and some really spectacular maps. There are.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there are these. There are maps of certain parts of the city of Ravnica, which Magic fans, so any Magic fans who are listening will be excited by this. This
A
is
map up the
yes,
10th district?
This is I believe the first time they're going to see a map of parts of the city. And these maps, rather than being rendered in a traditional style, have sort of this isometric view and this really painterly look. It's gorgeous.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Keith, I eventually want to do the same thing for Sharn.
I can literally see Keith's wheels turning as he's listening, like, these are all really good ideas.
So the really crazy thing about that map is that Jonas Duro is the artist who did it. When we had him in for a concept push working on Ravnica for the card set, and he built a 3D model of the 10th district of Ravnica. And in our world guide, it appears from a straight top-down view. Which makes it really hard to tell what things are because they're just boxes. But so we had him tilt it a little bit, and then he painted over it to make this map, and it's just amazing.
That is super cool. Yeah, and you mentioned all of these products that are urban-based and based in cities. Are there, if you're playing in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, can you use some of the thoughts and things behind, the modular things in Ravnica? Can you use some inspiration from the Sharn parts of Dungeon Masters Guild?
Question.
While you're
how much can you cross over? Can characters from Ravnica go to Eberron?
Because they're all part of the same multiverse now.
Or are they just going to be evaporated?
So
just like that. You have to act that out like that.
Role playing.
So our whole Sage Advice segment that we're about to do is actually going to be about that world hopping question. But in terms of the tools in the books, I think absolutely there are tools in each of the books that you could use with the other books. For example, Dragon Heist, we talked about this at Stream of Many Eyes. Dragon Heist has section of urban chases, you could easily use that chase material in one of these other two settings.
Absolutely.
Just as you could go to the material on Sharn, and Sharn is this extraordinary towering city. Some of the descriptions for which actually align up well with some places in Ravnica. And so there are bits you could take from each of these books to cross-pollinate. And then the monsters in particular in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica could crash into any of these other books. One great example, once people have their hands on Dragon Heist, there is a whole section on a circus that's in Waterdeep, and it has cages of various exotic critters. Well, if a DM ends up getting the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, they could certainly put some of the crazy Ravnica creatures into the circus in Waterdeep.
You could even turn the whole circus into the Cult of Rakdos.
Yes,
Right.
yes, that made it through a portal, and now they are bringing their demonic circus
Spikes and
to
fire.
another world.
As long as Zardoz is still in charge, that's all I care. Keith, you mentioned the lightning rails and things like that, and that seems to be a hallmark for Eberron, is this use of magic as like a technology and what that means. How can people, even if they're not want to delve into doing an Eberron specific campaign, how could they use some elements like that and kind of just infuse it into their D&D homebrew game?
I mean, one of the basic things about Eberron is just this idea that arcane magic behaves in a scientific way. It's reliable, it's repeatable, you can learn a spell. And so a lot of Eberron is just about thinking, if these things existed over time, how would we start to use them in more practical ways? And so certainly, there's a big section on just magic in the world that talks about sort of different aspects of things: communication, warfare, medicine, and any of those ideas. Someone might just say, "Oh, that makes sense. Let's make use of that," without embracing the entirety of Eberron. We also again talk a little bit about with 5th edition having sort of cantrips as a more accessible form of reusable magic. This idea of the wand slinger and sort of a little more stuff you can do with arcane focuses to add a little flavor to that kind of a character. And that again is something you could put into any D&D campaign. Other than that, some of the things like the airships or the Warforged or the lightning rail may or may not be things you want to drop into just any world. But even something like the Warforged, in Eberron, they're very much part of the story of the world, that you have, thousands of these sentient beings, created to fight in war. And what happens to them now is part of the story. But you could just as easily in any campaign, make your Warforged sort of the unique creation of some crazy wizard or something like that, and explore that as a different story.
It could be like the data or
Exactly.
lore of that world is these extra special Warforged.
Exactly right. And so that's sort of the point, is you can either explore the story that's built around them in Eberron, but there's many different stories you could tell if you just like the basic idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, for years I have looted Warforged and used them in other contexts and other worlds. Because I just love the idea in fantasy of a clockwork person.
Yeah, me too.
So I've often described them in different ways, but under the hood, they're Warforged, and I've just reskinned them.
One of the things I really like in this current edition is we have a kind of Warforged we call the Envoy. And the Envoy is, where most Warforged, the whole idea is they were made to fight. The Envoy is the idea that you were designed for a more specialized purpose. And Envoys essentially have like a built-in tool that's part of their body. And choose a skill. And one of the things we talk about there is in making that character, think about like, what were you actually made for? And are there a bunch of Warforged of your model, or are you, a unique prototype? So one of the examples we give is basically a Warforged with a built-in disguise kit that was made to be, sort of an infiltrator. And the little story, we're like, ooh, it could be that there's only like a dozen of these out there, and you're trying to figure out who the others are.
I love that my mind immediately goes to other, inspirations for that. Like, that's that envoy sounds like it's designed to be like the skin jobs in Battlestar Galactica, or when you said the specialized tool, I'm like, oh god, that's like the
Blade Runner,
the R2D2. Yes, Blade Runner. But what were the Cylons?
Yes.
Yes. In Battlestar Galactica, but then also the droids of like in Star Wars of having like a specialized tool that they can bring out and use, I just love that there's so many inspirations you can draw in from other places, similar to taking something from the guilds in Ravnica and bringing them into Eberron.
Exactly.
Yeah. Keith, you were saying that you seem to have knowledge of the guilds as well. Do you see any way that the Ravnica guilds could start infiltrating in Eberron?
Oh, I'm not as deep, deep into things as I could be, but absolutely. I mean, there's certainly, first off, just looking to something like Rakdos, we do already have something we call the Carnival of Shadows that you could easily blend some things together there. The Golgari. Again, Eberron has a number of sort of druidic sects, and there's one in particular where when I saw the Spore Druid, I was like, oh, okay, you could work that for the Children of Winter. And yeah, there's definitely a bunch of places where you could squeeze, you could definitely make use of some of that content.
I like that.
I'm running a very non-urban campaign right now, but Zugtmoy, the Demon Queen of Fungus, is a part of it, and I took some Golgari stuff and incorporated that into my campaign.
It's the best way, right? You just pull inspiration from wherever you think, and I think that's a good way for us as creators to envision how these books be used. They don't have to be used whole cloth. Like you're definitely only doing an Eberron setting, or you're only doing.
I like the mix and match.
Yeah.
It's like the Garanimals of adventure playing.
Or the Lunchables of... we
elephant
give you the
and
smorgasbord and you put them all together into one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so
exciting.
When we're talking about mixing and matching, so we haven't really crossed a stream quite like this before, right? D&D?
By using magic.
Using magic and D&D have kind of always
other than
walked next to each other, but never just...
Not other than the Plane Shift series that James has been doing. So this is our first time to really embrace it officially.
So how do you decide how much chocolate and how much peanut butter go together? Is it like a D&D book for Magic players, or is it like a Magic setting for D&D players? Like, how do you decide? Like, let's put D&D monsters and characters in Ravnica, or let's take these cool Magic creatures and bring them into D&D.
So it's a D&D book.
Okay.
Just full stop.
Yes.
It's a D&D book.
I mean, we're publishing it. So
but what I mean to say is it's not like we made like this is a book for Magic fans. No, it's a book for people who love D&D, and D&D has all these worlds, and now we're adding Ravnica essentially to the roster of worlds. We certainly would be delighted if Magic fans saw, there's this world I love, and it's in Dungeons and Dragons.
I see that being a potential audience here.
But at the end of the day, because we did go back and forth on this question, and
finding the right balance.
Yeah, and we decided in the end, no, this is going to be thoroughly a D&D book that is faithfully presenting this world from Magic the Gathering.
Yes.
In the course of my Plane Shift articles, I kind of went back and forth on that balance a couple of times, and in the evolution of this book went through some of the same back and forth. One example is the book actually has no mention. I mean, when I went through the guilds, I was talking about color pairs, but the book has no mention of the colors of Magic at all.
And this was a great example of my tendrils. Which
sometimes take the form of hammers.
Yes. So an earlier draft of the book actually was filled with references to the mana colors.
Okay.
But as I was reading through the manuscript, it became very clear to me that those colors were largely meaningless in a D&D context and required explanation over and over and over again, with no real payoff. And so we ended up stripping all of it from the book and just sort of present it straight. Like, here is this guild with no need for us to make reference to kind of this meta layer that makes sense if you're playing Magic the Gathering, but which you don't actually need to interface with this world because the world is so rich. And each of these guilds stands on their own with their story and their look and their personality. We were able to communicate all of that wonderful distinctiveness without needing to loop through this. And here's its monocolor.
Yeah. So
Right.
it is just a matter of stripping out a meta layer, though, because each guild entry has a philosophy section. And when we're talking about the Azorius, if you read carefully, you'll see, oh, I'm here talking about the white part of it and here talking about the blue part of it. But what it is a discussion of the philosophy of the guild and the different influences within it.
But there's no, I mean, I'm as being a longtime Magic fan and reading all the flavor text on the cards that was one of my favorite parts of the cards.
Yeah.
There's never a point where a character says, "I am for the blue,
Right.
go
Right.
blue." You
Right.
know,
Right.
it is always couched in terms that are meaningful to the character themselves, and mana doesn't come into that play really at all.
And that really gets at the shift in perspective that I had us do when I was like, please strip all this out. is I wanted the book to be you on the ground, not a person from our world sort of looking through this meta layer of this card game, and now you're looking at a piece of this card game in D&D. No, it's instead, no, we're going to visit the world of Ravnica. And what do the people there, how do they experience this? And so it's much more really how we would write any D&D campaign setting, where it's like, welcome, you're here, and here's what you see.
Right. Describing what the senses see and hear and feel and taste and touch, right? Like that's what's it's important. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's actually an interesting thing about the art, too. We did commission some new pieces of art, particularly full-page chapter starts. And we were able in those pieces to get a view of the city that we often don't see on cards, not least because the card art is so small, but to see an adventuring party walking down the street in the rain, and there's a Boros soldier and a Celestia cleric and a Simic something with a bunch of Dimir agents on the bridge behind them watching. That how would we ever get that in a card? It's too many figures. And what does it represent? But here it's the street level view of characters in Ravnica and what their life is like, as well as a D&D party, which is just awesome.
Yeah.
And the one piece of art that we've, a lot of people have seen hopefully today is that cover image. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that character. What does she represent?
She's not a specific character, but she is a member of the Is It League. Because they are red and blue, they're strongly associated with the power. Red is power of lightning and fire, and so they've got a lot of storm imagery and energy, which you see in that cover, as well as gadgets, an invention coming from the blue part.
Can you get the tendrils out of the?
It's hard. I give him a break on this because he works full time on Magic,
Right.
So the meta layer haunts your thoughts.
we have conversations on our team where we're sitting around discussing our own color alignments.
Right.
How do you fall?
Yeah, what's your color
I'm
alignment?
really green white.
You're what?
I'm really green white Celestia. I like to imagine that I'm Boros, and I'm just not.
Maybe you have Boros Rising?
Oh, it's an astrology sign
Maybe.
now.
Why not?
Yeah. What's your dragon mark?
Well, I've got a dragon mark, so I'm just saying.
That's right.
Oh my gosh! Now you can't just say that without
yeah.
showing us.
Mark of making.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
That is perfect. I love that. Now
And-
we're all going to get tattoos together.
And to switch back over to Eberron, as people who have already seen, who have picked up a copy of the Wayfinder's Guide, they will see one of the things I love that you did, Keith, was making the dragon marks sub races.
Yes.
That it is such a kind of deep part of your character that it's like shaping your very being. And I think it's a really exciting direction for dragon marks.
What I really like about that approach to dragon marks, which is something I developed along with Rudy Rutenberg of the Guild Adepts, is that the combination of dragon mark as a subrace and backgrounds lets you just tell an incredibly wide array of stories. Of, on the one hand, you have the dragon-marked noble, who is part of the house's, sort of ruling families and, one of the leading lights of the house. In the middle, you have sort of a guild artisan who, I'm with Kenneth, but, I just work at the smithy. And then you can also have the urchin who, I was never part of the family. I grew up on the street using my mark to help me survive.
I had no idea I had a Learndar parent.
Exactly. Or the criminal who you might have been kicked out of the house because of your background. And one of the things I do in the book is with each mark, I give a couple of examples of like, this is someone you could, who could have this mark with this particular combination of background and things, background and class. And so to me, I like it because it's something you can have right away, and you can really think about how has it been a part of your life. And do you have a connection to the house? And if so, what does that mean to you? So I'm really, really happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, that was a good discussion for folks who may know what a dragon mark is, but I'm sure there might be some people listening who are coming to this brand new. So yeah, what exactly does that mean, and how does it fit into how the rest of the world works after the war and such?
So, it's almost time back to our guilds in Ravnica. Dragon marks in Eberron are, there's a total of 12 existing marks that certain bloodlines carry a dragon mark. If it manifests on you, it grants you a certain innate magical ability, a sort of aptitude for something. So the mark of making makes you better at artifice and craft. The mark of passage makes you faster. The mark of storms controls weather. The families that carry these, they are hereditary powers, have sort of formed essentially guilds. We call them the dragon-marked houses that have used these powers to sort of corner an area of the economy of Eberron. And one of the sort of underlying themes of Eberron is this sort of drive between the growing economic power of the houses versus the existing sort of monarchies and old feudal structures of the world. And so again, you have these 13 dragon-marked houses that are these sort of very powerful, but nonetheless entirely mercantile entities. And again, if you choose, as a subrace, you can choose to say, well, I'm going to be an elf with the mark of shadow. And then again, it's up to you to say, well, do you have a tie to House Thorani? And how does that affect your character? And that's something you express through things like backgrounds.
That makes sense. That's pretty cool. Now, is the mark of making the one that you have on your arm, is that what all game designers are? All game designers are of the mark of making? Do you guys? I think you guys might.
Well, I'm trying to think what other marks would be appropriate. I mean, making does seem like
you're crafting, you're making something new.
One. I will say, in terms of other people I know with dragon mark tattoos, my sister, who does a lot of work with horses and dogs and such, has the mark of handling.
I think, Shelley, that might be yours.
Get one yet, but I'm working on
that one for sure.
Is there a mark of performance too? Is that right?
Well, the mark of shadow is about illusion, and you can use it to sort of conceal yourself, but you can also use it to sort of weave illusions and glamours and such. And so, going back to the idea of guilds, the houses of shadow dominate both espionage and the entertainment industry, because sort of on this.
Totally.
Yeah, on the surface they use it to sort of dazzle and impress, but then they've also got a secret, espionage business going underneath that.
That's totally you.
Yeah, I can do jazz hands at will now. It's
yes.
part of my it's part of my mark. That's awesome.
Your charm.
I love the idea that you need a rule to allow you to do jazz hands at will.
I cast jazz
Otherwise,
hands.
you must take a long rest before you.
Exactly. I've done it like 3 times, and I'm overtaxing myself. I have 3 levels of exhaustion now.
Move over, mage hand. It's time for the jazz hand.
Mage hand and jazz. It's so good.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I feel, as I always do when I talk to folks who are passionate about settings and things like this, I just feel inspired to tell so many different stories within these cities that we're talking about. So thank you for
Makers.
putting makers, yes, for wearing your mark with pride. And I'm excited for folks to jump into Eberron through the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron on Dungeon Masters Guild right now. It's available for download. I believe it's $19.99. Gets you 170 pages of amazing content, as well as the chance to use that to create your own stories and adventure material. So that's really exciting. And then, as I said, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica is coming out in November 9th in game stores, and November 20th everywhere. And Jeremy, of course, has hammers, tendrils and hammers in all of them.
Yes.
Not to mention the Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which are coming hot on its heels right now.
Yeah, we just sent Dragon Heist a couple of weeks ago off to the printer, and Catacomb. Sorry, that's our code name for Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That book is soon to follow after Dragon Heist off to the printer. So
Nice.
yeah, we have many books going through.
Busy last part of the year.
Oh yeah,
For sure.
And we're working on next year right now too.
And the year after that,
Yes.
as well as the D&D musical,
Right.
and all the other fun stuff that we're always working on. So this is awesome. Thank you, all of you, for coming in to talk about this. And we'll be talking about more in the Ravnica probably realm of things as we get closer to release, and then all the other fun stuff as well. And when you got updates coming from Eberron, can't wait to hear more about those.
Yeah.
And people can expect to see more Eberron goodies coming up in Unearthed Arcana also, because people will rightly wonder, where's the Artificer? Well, we did an experiment with the Artificer last year, and we have some more experiments on their way.
Sweet.
So people can expect more the Eberron goodness to also continue.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very
Can't wait for
exciting.
more.
Nice
Sweet.
to see you, Keith.
Yeah, great being here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll take a short break here on Twitch, reset the room a little bit, and then Jeremy and I will have the conversation that we've already had in the past. In the future, it will be in the present for you on Twitch in just about 5-10 minutes.
Hopefully we don't create some kind of paradox and destroy the world.
It's already happening. We're just going to snap.
We've given you a lot to talk about.
Yes.
It is.
Clearly, there's some questions.
And what's also, I want to make sure we mention before we get Keith on the line here that all of the music that you hear for this podcast, as well as the stuff here on Twitch, is from the City of Sharn sourcebook.
Yeah.
I only just learned about that myself. I think that's incredibly awesome because the Sharn source book long ago, it came with a CD as part of it, and I didn't realize you were using it. That's
We
fantastic.
need to do that again.
It's such good stuff.
It was
yeah.
the
really
hold
cool-
music at Wizards for a while.
Was it really?
Yeah.
It was the what?
The hold music.
hilarious.
Was it really?
Called
That's
Wizards.
fun.
Yeah.
You're like,
Very
please, we don't want to
popular.
talk to you. Please hold.
Yes.
And
People probably just call just to hear it.
Well, the secret is we're letting out our secret that we actually work in the city of Sharn.
There you go.
this has all been recording
Yes.
here in
Eberron,
Sharn.
Washington.
Eberron, Washington.
That kind of fits.
Yeah.
Awesome,
It
cool.
does
Well,
sound strangely natural.
It does.
so go listen to some Sharn music while we hold on here, guys. We'll be back soon.
Thanks.
Thanks.